This is The Blockchain Show. The Blockchain Show is a podcast that demystifies cryptocurrency and distributed ledger technology.
You're listening to episode number 98 with Jim Procanik, the Executive Director of Veridium. We're going to talk carbon credits and the blockchain. First, let's check in with Mark and Ian.
So there we go. Welcome, blockchain fans. And we are talking about lunch today. No, we do have a good interview for you, but we're just discussing lunch. Have you got Rubens in England yet?
Yeah, we have some Rubens. Yeah, some nice delis around. We're starting to get civilized over here. It's only what, I don't know, 100 years or so after you guys have set up Rubens. We can get Rubens. We can get lox and bagels. We can get all sorts.
Fabulous. Anyway,
it's like we invented civilization or something. Amazing.
Don't start that, Mark. Seriously, these days, you start saying you invented civilization, and next thing you know, you're being caught for something you did hundreds of years ago. You want to be careful with those sort of statements. Anyway, talking about the past, we're going to focus today on the future and carbon trading. And I'm going to hand you over to Jim. Without further ado, I'm sure he can explain why he's using the blockchain and what he's using it for much better than I can. Jim, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks very much. My name is Jim Procanik. I'm Executive Director of the Veridium Foundation. What we're doing is solving a liquidity issue with the environmental assets. So we're tokenizing, our first asset is carbon credits, tokenizing them and putting them on the blockchain so that institutions and people can buy and use them and trade them. And there's a pretty massive demand for these credits. It's just the first asset we're planning on tokenizing. The next could be water credits. There's a variety of environmental assets that we're planning on tokenizing and unlocking their liquidity. So it's a pretty amazing solution that is very much needed.
So is your view that this kind of solution couldn't have been done or couldn't easily have been done without blockchain?
Well, there's a couple of reasons for blockchain. Certainly, you could have had a centralized exchange or something to that nature, but we are working, partnering with IBM, and they're working on various solutions on Hyperledger Fabric, for example, which are supply chain management solutions that do use the blockchain. And they've asked basically for some sort of a solution where an environmental asset can be integrated into that. And so that's the other reason that blockchain, in fact, that's the reason it came up to us. We weren't searching for it or anything like that, but it became an obvious way to use our assets.
Yeah, I noticed the partnership with IBM. If our listeners go to veridium.io, that's veridium.io, you'll notice that Veridium are partnering with IBM. Could you tell us how that came about? Was it kind of out of the blue? Did they have a solution? You mentioned there the Hyperledger and those solutions for kind of logistic management and all that kind of thing. Did they approach you because of your expertise in that carbon market, or how did that come about?
Well, it's interesting. We in an old former life, we were going to launch this on Ethereum, and we were working with a very well-known group, Consensus. And for a variety of reasons, we felt Ethereum wasn't necessarily the best platform, and we decided to investigate Stellar. And literally a week later, IBM contacted us, and they had heard of our project, and they said, we think that you will integrate very well into what we're doing with these institutions, and we're being asked for this type of solution. And they were partnered with Stellar, and the more we researched Stellar, it really became a perfect fit. And so we all met in San Francisco about a year ago or so, and it's just been a great marriage so far.
That's really interesting. I think that's starting to echo and reflect some of the conversations Ian and Ethan and I have had with other interviewees over the past couple of months. Is that maybe last year we were talking to startups, to technologists who had kind of a solution on the hunt for a problem, We're starting now to see those problems coming first, I guess. The problem of how you manage those carbon markets, and actually blockchain tech has now sort of moved on a little bit to say, well, yeah, we can solve that problem. And I guess it's always easier to justify the expenditure of solving a problem that you have rather than trying to have a technology on the hunt of a problem. Is that something you've seen as well?
Yeah, it really is actually, and as you all know, this industry changes almost monthly. And when we first started, it was in the wave of the last summer, and you put a white paper out and raise $100 million. We've always been a very traditional business. We've been in the environmental business for almost 25 years, and the last 10 years specifically carbon credits. And we've seen the difficulty that companies have in digesting these credits and using them and transferring them. So when the blockchain came up, it just became logical. And then again, once we got into the space, we started getting contacted by, people like IBM. So I agree totally.
Looking at the team on your website as well, you look like to be an international team. Your website is available in Korean language, for example. I know at the very top of it, but you seem to have people who are operating around the world. How is that made up? How did that come together?
Well, I mean, first of all, Todd and I have lived. With our families, we've lived abroad for many years. He's lived abroad for 28 years, and me about 15, and mainly in Asia. He in Latin America as well. So I think our businesses have always been global and international and not very U.S.-centric per se. And so this issue, carbon credits, is global, and it's being used by pretty much every country around. Our project that generates these credits, which are only some of the credits in the token, we buy from a variety of projects, but is located in Indonesia, for example. So environment is a global issue. Carbon is a global issue. Emissions are a global issue. It just makes sense that the entire project is global.
Just to wind back slightly, what is a carbon credit and how is it useful for organizations and people today? Just to check that our listeners are all thinking the same as I am regarding carbon credits.
There's a lot of misunderstanding about carbon credits. I think the first thing is everybody knows we need to reduce our emissions, but we all, drive cars, fly in planes, heat our houses, and so there are emissions that cannot ever go to zero unless you want to live in a hut, and even then you're going to burn wood, right? So in order to offset or pay back to the environment for the emissions that we produce, one of the best ways, and I think probably the only ways, is through offsets. And that is a project somehow reduces emissions and has to prove that through very rigid standards. And they are then given basically 1 ton of carbon emissions per ton that they prevent or reduce. And then that is serialized into a number, and it's able to be traded and sold. Companies obviously are looking for ways to offset their emissions, and that's aside from reducing emissions, they need to buy offsets, and that's why they buy these type of credits.
I've got you. I understand. I've read a lot about financial traders actually moving into trading carbon credits. Is that something that's happening today, or has that market dwindled slightly?
Well, see, there's two primary markets. There's a compliance market, or like a government mandated market, primarily in Europe, although there's a robust one in California. And those are either credits, or in Europe, they're typically allowances, which are more a little bit different than a credit. But anyway, those are traded pretty robustly by companies primarily, and some secondary trading going on. But the type of credits that we are involved in are called voluntary credits. They're not part of any government mandated program, and they tend to be, in my opinion, a little bit higher quality because they involve things like forestry, which have other benefits besides just carbon. You're preserving a piece of nature. You're preserving a habitat for endangered animals, people that live around the forest, for example. So companies like Microsoft, who we sell to, that's the type of credit they typically like. So there is no secondary trading in this market. It's all OTC. Typically was going through brokers, or recently more going direct to us or to projects. So what we're really trying to do is create a platform, a trading platform of sorts that people can tokenize their credits, or in our case, we've created a basket token of carbon. And we believe there's a lot of demand out there for these credits. We know there is, actually.
Well, definitely, if you've raised 100 million through the white paper, I think that's quite an impressive achievement. So whereabouts are you in your process at the moment? Are you gone public? Is there an ICO, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, we're really approaching it several different ways. The traders, at the energy companies in particular, they're the most active traders, like a BP or a Shell, for example. They obviously right now are only able to trade with each other. So we're trying to create this platform so that individuals can participate. So we are doing I wouldn't call it a public sale, but like a private pre-sale where people can get involved that are interested in this. And then eventually, and then we'll obviously sell it to institutions and companies. And what we hope is the more hands that these get in, the more trading that goes on, it creates a more liquid environment.
What sort of timescales are you hoping to roll it out to some of those companies, those users of this solution?
Well, I think hopefully by first quarter, the platform will be active. We're in active development with IBM on this, and we expect it to be operational then. We hope to close the sale sometime this year or early next year. We're not in a big rush per se, because it's really a long-term business, and it's we're trying to build it with the type of people that are going to be around for the long term. It's not a flash sale or anything like that.
Yeah, IBM certainly seems to be trying to grab hold of that blockchain space, as much as any of some of the larger guys are. But IBM particularly is a name I think that keeps coming up as active in this space, and you wouldn't bet against them to stick around, would you?
No, they've really they've really sunk their teeth in deeply, and we're really impressed with them, frankly, because it's not just one division that's working on blockchain. They've pretty much integrated it into many different divisions. I mean, I've been on calls with their energy division, their auto division, different divisions that are all using blockchain, and they're all interested in integrating some sort of environmental aspect into it as well.
So do you have many? So first of all, I've noticed again on your website, you kind of have the foundation side of things, and then you have the Veridium exchange. Are you able to describe what the distinction is between those two?
Sure. The foundation is really the entity that's going to hold and custody these credits. So what's interesting about this project is, not very many tokens have verifiable assets behind them. And so the carbon token, we have two tokens, but the carbon token is transparently backed by carbon credits. Those are held in a registry account. It's called, there's a few registries, but the primary one is Markit, M-A-R-K-I-T. They're out of London, and they're the preeminent environmental registry. And there are others as well. And so you can actually go online and go into Veridium Foundation's account and see the credits that reside there. And so, for example, if Shell or somebody were to buy some of these tokens and they said, well, we'd rather just take the underlying credit, they would be able to do that, through the foundation. So I guess what I'm saying is the foundation is really the custodian of the asset. The exchange is, of course, more of the business side, which is going to hopefully create this liquidity and create a platform for trading.
And they're both
assets.
I guess both international, both global organizations, right? You're not sat in a single office in Toronto or London or somewhere. You're spreading yourself. You're going where the people are, where the talent is, where the enthusiasm is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the foundation we've chosen is in Canada. A few different reasons for that, but we really like the jurisdiction, and they understand this space. The exchange, the company is based in Hong Kong, which is where we've been based for many years. and we love that jurisdiction as well. And yeah, I think, listen, Korea is a huge market for carbon, and Asia is really becoming more and more interested in it. Europe, of course, I'm in London quite often. So I think we're probably going to end up having offices in each, major global area, I would say.
Do you think that is, I guess, linked to the carbon business? Or I think that's also something that blockchain-enabled businesses will enjoy as well going forward.
It really is. It's a fascinating business because when you start hiring people, I mean, today I was on the phone with Estonia. The other day I'm on the phone with Korea, or all over the world. These talent pools, they're very distributed, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, I think we talked in a previous podcast about certainly Estonia. I worked in UK government a couple of years back, and Estonia was sort of seen as the poster boy for digital government in Europe, and you have a huge talent pool there of learning and how to build good digital stuff. And I think blockchain is a natural extension.
It is, but it does get a bit lonely. You can't have lunch with too many people that you'd like to.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Well, if you're ever in London, Jim, if you get lonely, if you fancy a coffee, just look me up and I'll take you for a coffee.
Well, I definitely would like to come for your national food, which is actually Indian food. But sure, absolutely.
It's true. Yeah, that's true. The first Indian restaurant opened in the UK earlier than the first fish and chip restaurant.
I know. I get a chuckle out of that. I know a lot of Brits where I've lived, and it's a constant joke.
A good curry is all part of the British experience, as well as fish and chips and newspaper. I would agree, but yeah, it's somehow we've taken curry on.
Is that why you left us, Ian? Is that why you left us to go to live in Orlando?
Exactly. Far too much fish and chips and curry. Yeah, it's a great reason to leave a country, isn't it? Yeah, I can't really be doing with the food. The problem I find with food like that is it just makes my clothes shrink at quite an extraordinary rate.
It's incredibly clothes shrinking. Yeah.
Exactly. That's good. I can say that after having a nice greasy Reuben for lunch today as well.
It's good stuff.
Which is good. It's interesting. It's interesting what you said about the recycling aspect and the fact that emissions. Because my mother explained that in England everybody's about recycling. You've got to pay for plastic bags in supermarkets, and she comes over to America and there's V8s going around everywhere, and people sort of they take a nod towards recycling, but it's not as intense as it is in England. And her question was, how can England make a difference when America is such a large country and it's not being taken as seriously? So it's interesting the way you're approaching this from the carbon emission side of things, and it's a good thing. How do you find it globally and people's perception of this globally?
I think what we see is a lot of momentum. The interesting thing you probably aren't aware of is that there's massive push from investors, and so that'd be pension funds and sovereign wealth funds that are pressuring companies to deal with this problem. And so, we're finding ourselves in Europe, and they're talking to a sovereign wealth fund, for example, or people that work for them, and saying, they're very concerned about their investments. They're invested in fossil fuel companies or consumer goods companies that have a huge environmental footprint and that aren't really being mitigated. So they're looking for solutions, is what we're finding.
And who regulates this industry?
Well, again, it's not regulated everywhere, and the solution that we're coming up with is really a market-based solution, which we actually really believe in, and we believe that consumers need to push change. We can't always rely on a government to come up with a solution, and typically their solution is maybe not the best. So, the more that people are aware of what's happening in our environment and how we need to take responsibility for it, I think the more that companies will do the same.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's just as an example, to basically offset a candy bar, for example, it might be as little as a few cents more, and that money would go toward the environmental impacts of producing that candy bar, the peanuts, or, wherever all the different ingredients are made, there's impacts made at all those places. And typically they're not really being compensated for that. The environment's not being compensated. Let's put it that way.
It's fascinating. But it's really, really interesting to hear that we have these technology solutions that are, I guess, being designed from the ground up to help us deal with some of these macro problems that we have as a planet. And I think as a citizen of the world, I genuinely hope that these initiatives are successful and we can start, balancing, getting a fair amount of balance in that carbon offset market in the other ecological markets.
I mean, water, again, like I mentioned earlier, water is going to be the next huge thing that we really need to deal with, is clean water. And we kind of take it out of the earth, and necessarily we don't replenish it, and we don't make sure that the next generation is going to have clean water. And that's another credit that I think needs to be available, so that money is funneled to projects that are dealing with this problem as well.
Well, that was quite an interesting thing, going off at a tangent when I went to the Space Center in Florida. They're talking about missions to Mars, and that's going to take 2 years. And they're not going to be able to take 2 years worth of water. So, recycling of water is totally possible. And, we could do that a lot better than we're doing at the moment.
Well, we could do that, or we could just be careful and not be, contaminating it, and a lot of it is, again, we kind of get away with whatever is the cheapest way to get away with, manufacturing or producing agriculture or livestock or whatever, when there is a cost, environmental cost that needs to be paid.
Wow, that's that is incredibly eye-opening, mind-opening. Something like this, something like good old blockchain that came out of some cupboard somewhere of some crypto enthusiast, that blockchain could help save the world.
Yeah, it's quite amazing when you think about the impact that is possible.
Absolutely. So, Jim, how do people get involved? How do they find out more? And where do they download this wonderful white paper from?
Well, of course, our website, Veridium.io. And we have a Telegram channel, Veridium Labs, at Veridium Labs. And, of course, Facebook and, all the other social channels. We are really ramping up the information and activities. So, they'll get a steady supply. We were just named, I don't know if you saw the article, but Forbes came out with their top 9 blockchain projects for 2019, and we were named as one of the 9. It's pretty exciting.
Wow.
Woohoo!
Yeah, a pretty big deal. 125 million people go on that website. So, we're very excited. Obviously, the market's on a downtrend right now, but that's just temporary. And obviously, blockchain is not necessarily the same as cryptocurrencies anyway.
Yeah.
So we're really betting on the technology, on blockchain in particular, and we believe IBM is just an amazing partner. And we're very excited.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I think just echoing you. I think we talked about it again recently. Maybe the noise, the white noise of crypto value is kind of dying down a bit, but that's left people to focus on the technology. There's still solutions out there to be found.
Definitely.
To problems, and this is a useful tool in people's toolboxes, and we just need to work out whether it's a posi drive screwdriver or a spanner, and work out what we do with it.
Definitely.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you, Jim, and thank you everybody in podcast world for downloading us and liking us and increasing our listenership, which is always important. And I hope that interviews such as this gives everybody further insight into how they can use blockchain for good and for the better of mankind. I think that's about right, isn't it, Jim?
Absolutely. That
was fascinating, Jim. Thank you very much for joining us this week. And we'll get all your website links up onto our podcast notes, up onto our website. That's theblockchainshow.com. For those of you that haven't already found it and listening to it via that way. We'll help spread the word.
Great. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Jim. This week, the phrase that pays is going to be tweet us and say, I'm full of carbon. There we go. That's this week's phrase. So if you listen this far, we want a tweet saying, I'm full of carbon.
You've been drinking lots of fizzy beer there, Ian, haven't you?
No, I had
lots of carbonated lager.
I wish. No, red wine last night, which was pretty good.
Oh, don't have fizzy red wine. That generally means it's gone off a bit.
Or you're at a very bad party and you've decided that you need to shake things up a little bit.
Excellent.
Cheers, Mark.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Speak to you all again soon. Bye now.
To learn more, visit theblockchainshow.com.